For one, they make the handset feel reassuring to hold, with that prominent curve helping the turbo nestle into your palm. And the second, arguably more important reason? To accommodate those precious innards, which include a speedy quad-core 2.7 GHz Snapdragon 805 chip, 3 GB of RAM and that tremendous 3,900 mAh battery. Motorola says it'll net you around 48 hours of continuous use on a charge, but we'll revisit that claim later on. Anyway, yes, the Droid Turbo feels great, except for maybe the gummy-feeling volume rocker/SIM tray. The front is somehow even less visually interesting, though that changes when the 5.2-inch Quad HD screen comes alive. Other than that, though, there isn't much to look at, just a wide speaker grille sitting above the 2-megapixel front-facing camera, and the capacitive touch buttons baked into the bezel beneath the screen. Display and sound. The MOTO X and the Droid Turbo both sport 5.2-inch AMOLED screens, but that's where the similarities end, much to the chagrin of X owners, I'd wager. That's because the panel Motorola used on the Turbo runs at Quad HD, or 2560 x 1440, if you haven't already committed it to memory, making it one of the most pixel-dense displays you'll find on a smartphone. The effect, as you'd imagine, is pretty stunning. Your stories, your videos, your apps, they're going to look just lovely. That said, a screen like this will make you all too aware that the internet is peppered with low-res images and icons, so be ready to shield your eyes whenever you come across them. Skype is a good example of this visual discrepancy in action. Your messages will look crisp, while emoticons will be tiny since they're so low-res. The end result is audio that's plenty loud, but cramped and muddy, without much distinction between channels. That's not to say the speaker's bad, per se, it's on par with most of the speakers in other smartphones, which is to say they get the job done and don't aspire to much more. Keep a pair of headphones handy and you'll never have to worry about it. If you've handled a Motorola phone in the past year, you've probably noticed that the company doesn't like futzing around with pure Android when it doesn't have to. Thankfully, that philosophy hasn't changed, so we're treated to almost the same, nearly stock version of Android 4.4.4 that graced the MOTO X, except without the lovely Google Now launcher preloaded. Camera. The MOTO X's lackluster 13-megapixel camera might have been one of its biggest failings, and it's clear that Motorola wasn't about to let that happen again. That would explain why the Turbo instead packs a 21-megapixel rear shooter with a wide f/2.0 lens, a combination that's just utterly, staggeringly better than what its poor cousin has to offer. The full-resolution photos I snapped looked crisp and vivid, though not to the point where I'd worry the shots were technically inaccurate somehow. That said, low-light performance wasn't much to write home about. Smartphone cameras have historically been pretty lame when the lights start to dim, and it wasn't long at all before I started noticing grain creeping into my shots. Front-facing cameras are rarely anything to get fired up over, and the 2-megapixel shooter buried in the Turbo's forehead doesn't buck that trend. Your shots will be more than enough to swap on Instagram, or Tinder, if that's more your speed, but don't expect anything extravagant. On the plus side, the Turbo fares way better when it comes to video. The 1080p and 4K test footage I captured throughout the week was crisp, attractive, and well exposed, even if switching focus from one subject to another took a little bit of work. We'd be looking at one hell of an anticlimax if the Droid Turbo were a laggy piece of junk, but the thing definitely lives up to its name. I mean, of course it would. There's a 2.7 GHz quad-core Snapdragon 805 running the show, paired with 3 GB of RAM, an Adreno 420 GPU and a software stack that more or less stays out of the way. I can only imagine how buttery it'd feel running Android 5.0. Now, about that battery. Motorola likes to say you can squeeze a full 48 hours out of the Turbo on a single charge, and I don't doubt it. What really matters is the quality of that experience. After all, eking crazy longevity out of your phone doesn't mean much if you only get to use it as a glorified pocket watch. During my week of testing, the Turbo's battery routinely stuck with me for 2 full working days at a time, or about 18 hours of on and off phone calls, email replies, tweets, YouTube videos and the occasional songs jam session. As someone who has to basically coddle his iPhone for most of the day, using the Turbo was a revelation. The only way you're going to nab a Droid Turbo is by inking a deal with Verizon Wireless, which narrows your field of competitors by quite a bit. Let's lead off with the most obvious alternative, the top-rated MOTO X. What the thing lacks in battery and camera upgrades, it makes up for in sheer style. For a price, you can customize one to hell and back. The Droid Turbo is frustrating. It's objectively better than the MOTO X in most of the ways that matter. Its battery is tremendous, if not as amazing as Verizon claims, the screen is lovely, and the camera is actually worth using. Here's what it boils down to: the Droid Turbo is an undeniably great device and probably the best carrier-exclusive phone since the days of, well, the original Motorola Droid. It won't win any awards for design or sound quality, but that won't make anyone who already bought a MOTO X feel better.